time if you have the cards.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's my fault for not getting one. I haven't gotten around to it yet.
And what we need to do is, if I could say so, kind of better market them.
In addition to facial recognition, New York City's police department is just one of many law enforcement agencies that also requires citizens to undergo an iris scan before being released from police custody.
Other eye.
Sir, are you being arrested?
I am.
What's your name?
Robert Johnson.
Robert Johnson? And what are you being arrested for?
I have no idea.
The former head of the Israeli Shin Bet intelligence services, Avi Dichter, who's accused of war crimes against the Palestinians, spoke beside FBI Director Robert Mueller at a police convention, at a convention before 11,000 top law enforcement officers. And after Mueller called Dichter his mentor in counterterrorism, Dichter urged American police to view their opponents, those they seek to arrest, as crimi-terrorists. In other words, to blur the line between common criminals and terrorists. So what we're seeing is not only a legal blurring of the lines between criminals, terrorists, and protesters, but something in the mindset of American policing and in their training, in which the civilian population is viewed as a hostile and menacing force that can be acted against with military-grade weaponry. Michael Bloomberg, the mayor of New York, has said that he feared that the Occupy movement would gain too much of a foothold and would continue to expand. And I was there at the raid on Zuccotti Park in downtown New York, and what I saw from the NYPD reminded me of demolitions I've witnessed by the Israeli army and the Israeli border police inside Israel and in the occupied West Bank. And as I reported, there's been, since 9/11, since the war on drugs transferred into the war on terror, 9,000 American police officers have been trained by Israeli security and intelligence officials. Hundreds of top law enforcement officers have gone to Israel to train, and what they're learning there is counter-terror training by a country that has spent 63 years dispossessing and controlling an indigenous population. Now they're bringing that back into the streets in the United States against the civilian population. So you're seeing a process since the war on terror of Israelification, and this is extremely dangerous in terms of what it means for the relationship between civilians and their protection under established civil liberty codes.
Look, I just now Googled YouTube police brutality, and guess what came up? 497,000 cases on YouTube of videos that people have taken. Well, that's 500,000. I mean, that's 3,000 less than 500,000. So, and these are all very violent, gratuitous. They're using tasers against mothers with children, against old people in wheelchairs. They're body slamming 92-year-old great-grandmothers. It's an endless array of just gratuitous violence. If you think about that number, 497,000, now some of these may be, some of these videos may be on YouTube more than once. You know, more than one person may have put them, so it's hard to know. But I believe that number is as large and possibly larger than criminal assaults on the public in the United States.
California policeman who lost control of his dog was devastated after the dog attacked demonstrators. That's what Anaheim's police chief says when he apologized to people who were bitten. It happened after police shot and killed an unarmed man Saturday.
Police on Saturday approached several men in an alleyway, and when those men started running, one of them was shot dead by police, though he was unarmed and posing no danger to anyone.
By all accounts of witnesses who were there and those who were victims of the attack, someone named Manuel Diaz, who is a local resident in the community, was not in an alleyway with his friends, as the police say, but was simply in the neighborhood. They did run when police confronted them, but when Manuel Diaz had already been shot once and was surrendering, when he was shot a second time in the head, killing him, at that point, he was still alive. People in the community were yelling out to the police that he was still alive, to give him medical attention, but instead the police were more concerned with blocking people filming and then handcuffed and searched Manuel Diaz as he was dying on the ground. Then, understandably, people who had just witnessed this attack and who deal with police brutality and intimidation on a daily basis was coming out onto their front lawns into the community, voicing their opposition to what happened, peacefully protesting on their front lawns what had happened in their neighborhood. And the police responded unprovoked, without warning, first firing rubber bullets, beanbag shotguns, which have both been known to kill people, using pepper spray bullets and tear gassing people, and then unleashing an attack dog, as we saw in the video, on a woman and child.
Breaking news right now, chaos erupts after a controversial police shooting in Anaheim, and tonight the tension continues. Officers fire what appear to be beanbags and unleash a canine into a crowd of women and children.
Chaos and violence in the streets of Anaheim. Anaheim police firing rubber bullets confront a crowd of terrified children, parents, and angry residents near La Palma and Acacia. Then one officer unleashes a snarling police dog, which attacks a mother holding her child and this bystander.
They just started shooting him. I was with my son and the dog just came.
This is the man that was on the floor. And the
he
man
was on the floor and they shot.
Talk about what happened.
They just released the dog and I had my baby and my in my stroller, and the dog just scratched me with his teeth and then just grabbed me.
It all started around 4 o'clock this afternoon when police shot this man, known in the community as Stomper. Police say he was one of 3 men who took off running when they approached him earlier in the afternoon. Neighbors who saw the shooting say police overreacted. Then they confronted the officers, demanding answers. That's when the pandemonium broke out.
We just started shooting again. No, we don't have no guns, nothing.
I just got scared. I just saw a water bottle get thrown in the air. They just started shooting everyone. They shot a little kid too.
People who are attracted to police forces are bullies. Now, I don't mean that all of them are bullies, but it does attract bullies and it attracts sociopaths. So the personality that goes into that line of work is a dangerous personality in many cases. And now, another thing that's happened is the police have been militarized by the federal government. They're now issued with military-type weapons, and they've been trained to view the public as an enemy. They see the public not as something they protect, but as an enemy that needs to be suppressed.
The reason that man is being assaulted by the police is because of what he has in his hand. He's holding a professional-grade video camera.
Police have, as you said, just this year in 2011, received $500 million in surplus military weaponry from the Pentagon, which is authorized through the Pentagon's 1033 program. During the late 70s, Congress passed legislation called Posse Comitatus, barring the military from operating on American soil. And in the early 80s, there was an effort to circumvent that in Congress by arming police with military-grade weaponry. And now we're seeing that play out in the streets. People in the inner city in the U.S. have been experiencing this since the 80s, and now middle-class Americans in the Occupy movement are facing not only pepper spray, but things like the LRAD sound cannon, the long-range acoustic device, which can blast your cranium with 140 decibels, shaking your skull so hard even earplugs won't stop it. This weapon has been tested on Palestinians in the occupied West Bank by the Israeli army. So civilians in the U.S. are now up against basically military-style policing.
In the past 6 months, iris scans have been taken from hundreds of Occupy Wall Street activists placed under arrest, like Christina Gonzalez.
Yeah, they really don't tell you why. They just say it's another form of identification, and it's really creepy to have someone holding up some machine to your face and you have no idea not only the health effects of it, but what they're actually using, what their larger purpose of using it is for.
An example how we employ biometrics against the enemy combatants here. An individual, local, national, employs for a work badge at a coalition facility. His biometrics are collected and he's enrolled in the biometric automated toolset database. Subsequent to that, the individual no longer returns to the coalition facility to work. He's identified as being involved in activities against the coalition.
Although armed to the teeth, Shadow Troops' mission is not to search out and destroy the Taliban. Instead, their mission is to court the locals by offering building projects and jobs, while at the same time mapping the different tribes and collecting biometric data for future intelligence.
In days past, it was, how many tanks are on the objective or how many bad guys are here. Now it's what tribe are these people, how many people live in a village, and what do they do?
While he promises the village projects, jobs, and security, U.S. soldiers outside are using state-of-the-art technology to enter biometric data for all the military-aged men. Retina scans, fingerprints, and photographs.
Right now, across Afghanistan, service members are using the handheld Interagency Identity Detection Equipment, or HIDE, to build a database to track down enemies.
Officer Belke has worked on traffic enforcement for about a year.
Routine squad check.
Before each shift, he'll inspect the usual gear.
Want to make sure your shotgun's ready to go.
And these days, he also reviews his latest tool for law enforcement. It's a mobile fingerprinting machine.
The system is a biometric scanner. It records fingerprints, scans both eyes, and takes a photo of the face.
I got my children to go pick up. I need your right pointer finger, please.
You put me up for some bull.
Don't, ma'am, put the window down.
What do you want now?
Okay. When I come back with the citations, you'll be free to go, okay?
Milwaukee police officer Joseph Belke is trying to use a new device to speed up the process.
Ma'am, I'm just out here doing my job.
You ain't doing shit. I didn't do nothing.
If only she would let him.
And shortly, I will need your left finger.
Know that while my dad got shot and buried in the mother River, you hear pulling over people for stupid like this.
Soldiers are able to keep track of local populace by using biometric technology to keep records that include fingerprints and irises. The systems are being used both in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Army soldiers with the 101st Airborne Division prepare for work. Today's mission is to hide the Afghans as they come through a traffic control point here in Host Province. It may sound a little strange, but hiding the Afghans is common all over Afghanistan. The handheld interagency identity detection equipment, or HIDE, is a portable device that establishes and verifies identities using iris, fingerprint, and facial recognitions. First Lieutenant Michael Johnson says biometric enrollment is an incredible force multiplier.
The HIDE mission is improving the mission just because of the way that we can track folks.
The biometric data collected during HIDE missions is stored and used across the board for criminal investigations.
The information that we take today can be stored and used for years to come. We can also look back through previous cases. Those fingerprints will pop up, as will irises and facial recognition.
The Pentagon is currently testing something called the Total Information Awareness Program.
This is what the government would monitor: where Americans travel, what they buy, how much money they withdraw. Electronic records from all of those activities and more dumped directly into the Pentagon. Supporters of the Total Information Awareness Project say private industries such as credit rating companies already collects a lot of this material, so why not let the government take a look? Normally, though, authorities would have to get a warrant for electronic surveillance.
The big deal is that the government is proposing to arrest people on the basis of this. The government's proposing to label people as terrorists, to have an impact upon their lives in a very direct and significant way.
Not only is the idea controversial, so is the person who came up with it and is running the pilot project.
Admiral, do you swear?
President Reagan's national security advisor, John Poindexter, was convicted, then cleared on a technicality of lying to Congress during the Iran-Contra scandal. The test run now underway could take a few years, and real information, say officials, is not being used. But the Pentagon is clearly moving to create the largest electronic eye ever to look at any and all Americans.
I remember and still feel the shock of seeing a line of men in wheelchair being rolled to chow. I stopped because you saw these wheelchairs coming out of the mist. I've never seen anything like that. But from this great expansive age, you can see very, very young men who don't even shave. If you look inside the bars, you're looking at millions of men and women and juveniles, as I noted before. But even beyond that, I mean, how free are we today, those who claim to be non-prisoners? Your computers are being read by others in government. Your letters, your phone calls are being intercepted. We live now in a national security state where the United States is fast becoming one of the biggest open-air prisons on earth.
Dana Priest co-wrote a lengthy investigative story for The Washington Post on new high-tech tools and data sharing used by Homeland Security and law enforcement.
To find people who might be acting suspiciously. But more importantly, it's this vast amount of data that is now available commercially to police departments. There's just so much more available on you than you would imagine. And it is now at the hands of law enforcement who, in combination with this suspicious activity reporting, is just going to know a lot more about you and can keep that in this file to see whether it adds up to anything that's truly suspicious.
The ATF on the federal website has put out the bid for data mining to spy illegally on all gun owners and your web activity.
Assange detailed the spy files, shedding light on a $5 billion industry.
Today, we release over 287 files documenting the reality of the international mass surveillance industry. An industry which now sells equipment to dictators and democracies alike in order to intercept entire populations. That statement sounds like it's something from Hollywood. That statement sounds like it could only be science fiction. So who here has an iPhone? Who here has a BlackBerry? Who here uses Gmail? Well, you're all screwed.
Facebook in particular is the most appalling spying machine that has ever been invented. Here we have the world's most comprehensive database about people, their relationships, their names, their addresses, their locations, their communications with each other, their relatives, all sitting within the United States, all accessible to US intelligence.
What if the cops just all of a sudden went willy-nilly through your Facebook page and they searched for everything about you, where you've been, who you did, what you wear, everything, and then they charge you with a crime? Well, according to a new report in the Detroit News, that appears to be a new trend in law enforcement.
In the virtual world of tweets, Facebook posts, and search engines, every internet user is defined by a data footprint. If you think anonymous comments and blogs are protected, think again.
The FBI has come down on a man that they claim used Twitter along with police scanners to help protesters at the G20 last month to stay a step ahead of the police. 41-year-old Elliot Madison of New York is charged with hindering apprehension or prosecution, criminal use of a communication facility, and possession of instruments of crime. Instruments of crime. Explain that. What do you think about Twitter being described as an instrument of crime?
As you mentioned, it's people using Twitter to facilitate a demonstration. If this happened in Iran or China, where we know Twitter has been widespread because folks in this country have been relying on it to find out what's going on. If it was used there, we'd be crying foul. We'd be saying it's a human rights violation. And when the same thing happens in this country, all of a sudden it's a crime. There's a real problem here. This is really creative charging, and what's most distressing is if you look at all of the papers, the only criminal activity that they've identified that these folks were supposedly helping was failure to disperse in a public thoroughfare. And I can tell you in Pittsburgh, there wasn't a whole lot of traffic that week because we had pretty much of a police state. They've used, not only this kind of charge, but all sorts of intimidation to discourage, to intimidate, and ultimately to prevent peaceful demonstrators from getting out their message against the government. I mean, these would be considered dissidents in other countries, and it would be a human rights violation. Why we're treating them as criminals here is really beyond me.
If I have a large enough sample of your writing and your posting, I can take it and compare it. I can input it into a database and send that database a bot out using that information, finding every other post you ever did.
The digital data trail of every American will soon be connected to a massive building in Utah. A $2 billion data center is reportedly being constructed for the U.S. National Security Agency. The complex will allegedly be able to collect, analyze, and store all forms of personal communication, including online purchases, cell calls, Google searches, and yes, private messages.
Federal law enforcement agencies routinely track Americans in real time using credit cards, loyalty cards, and travel reservations, all without getting a court order.
The moment you swipe your card at Starbucks, the FBI or the DEA finds out. And that's something that there's no law to allow. Given that we know that NSA and other agencies have been listening to our phone calls illegally for years, it's not that surprising that they're following our credit card transactions too. But what is surprising is that this real-time surveillance is happening without any sort of thorough judicial review. There's no judge saying, is there probable cause here? There isn't any oversight. There aren't any statistics. There are no checks and balances. And so this is a situation that is really ripe for abuse.
I mean, it is just wall-to-wall criminal activity. There are tens of thousands of private intelligence groups now that have been given full national security access to everything. So understand, it's not just Nixon spying on you with your IRS records, and he was going to go to jail for that until he stepped down. Now, thousands and thousands, including quasi-foreign mercenary groups, are given above top secret clearances to listen to your phones, get in your computers, your bank accounts, and they put it on the news. Oh, intelligence agencies look at your bank account every day. Intelligence agencies listen to you. Private contractors. I mean, it is just the age of the criminal. Every criminal on earth turned loose, the government recruiting them to absolutely implode and rob everyone. This is like the French Revolution, the Jacobins, the opposite of our revolution. This is an Illuminati, crazy person orgy.
This is what they did to my door.
At 6 this morning, a SWAT team surprised Kenneth Wright at his front door.
In my underwear. In my underwear. Before I get to the door, I hear him say, hit it. And I get ready to hit the door, and they hit the door. They almost hit me. So I said, hold on. They hit it again. I said, hold on.
But the SWAT team busted in, taking Wright.
They come grab me by my neck and drag me out my house to right there in the grass.
Thrown to the ground and handcuffed, law enforcement then searched his house.
And they put me in the backseat of a police car for over 6 hours. From 6 o'clock to 12:30, they had me handcuffed in the back of a police car with nothing on but my ripped up underwear that they ripped in the yard.
Wright says they also woke his 3 children, holding them for 2 hours, but they failed to find their quarry, Wright's estranged wife. Wright later complained to Stockton's mayor and police, but the city pointed to the U.S. Department of Education.
They say you owe a student loan and you gotta pay it. I just had my door kicked in because of this.
He was woken up at 6 a.m., dragged out of the house, and he and his 3 children were detained, all because of overdue student loan payments. And Kenneth claims that it wasn't even his overdue payment, but his estranged wife's.
It was the Department of Education who conducted the search, but they can't discuss anything in the case until it's closed. Not even if it's policy to break in and handcuff people who default on student loans.
They put this here and they said, we fixed the hole. The hole is the least of my worries.
The threat environment now is constantly changing. It's constantly evolving. Now we've got the so-called homegrown and the homegrown violent extremists to deal with as well. So the threat picture has changed, it has evolved, and it continues to evolve. It requires us to really have a new kind of what I call a security architecture.
Mandatory federal standards for issuing driver's licenses. The Department of Homeland Security is expected to issue new guidelines this week, and states have just over a year to put them in place.
After 9/11, Congress mandated tough new federal standards for driver's licenses called Real ID. States are supposed to implement them in little more than a year. Every one of the 245 million license holders in the United States will have to reapply in person with documents that prove they are citizens or legal residents. Homeland Security is taking an even harder line.
If we don't get it done now, someone's going to be sitting around in 3 or 4 years explaining to the next 9/11 Commission why we didn't do it.
If you don't comply, then your licenses can't be used as federal IDs. That means you can't use them to get into federal buildings. You can't use them to board airplanes. So consequence for the citizens.
The FBI is tracking down fugitives using face recognition technology, and the source of the faces? Photos taken at the Department of Motor Vehicles for your driver's license.
And believe it or not, we're exposed to this every day. We go to the store, we go to the ATM. If you go to a Super Bowl game, if you go to a casino, facial recognition programs are all around us, and they're only going to be improved and used more and more as time goes on. What the law enforcement is doing is they are accessing all information.
They're treating us all like criminals. That's what they're doing.
You walk into a casino and you're being looked at as if you're a
Does that make that right?
That's not true.
At least I can choose not to walk into a casino. I can choose not to walk into the football game.
The community does not accept that. The community will not accept that fugitives are out running the streets when the FBI could have very easily looked at a database and caught them before they do more harm to our communities.
They will when more and more ordinary citizens are on the other side of defending these allegations, and we no longer have a world where you're innocent until proven guilty, because at the other side of every single good wish of catching criminals is putting innocent people in the other side of defending their innocence. Just because we find ourselves in a world where there is, a diminished sense of privacy doesn't mean that it's legal or constitutional. It sort of sets our whole sense of the constitutional, issues on its face. What happened to the Fifth Amendment? What happened to the Fourth Amendment?